Hello and welcome to episode number 552 of Smart Podcast Trashy Books. I'm Sarah Wendell, and my guest this week is Melonie Johnson. Her new book, Too Wrong to Be Right, is out this week, and we are going to talk about the difference between contemporary romance and rom-coms, and writing about characters who work in the funeral industry, which we have both done. I want to give you a heads up that we start talking about different burial options and the funeral industry at about 14 minutes in. So if that's not something that you want to listen to, you want to skip ahead probably about 4 minutes. We also talk about burnout in the publishing industry and grieving the professional relationships that are lost. Now, stay tuned for a future episode because Melonie is going to join me again to take a deep dive into a book, coincidentally, that we were both reading when I recorded this interview. This is a nonfiction book called All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell. So we will be talking about that in a future episode. Hello and thank you to our Patreon community. I have a compliment this week. And would you believe I have given out more than 300 compliments? How cool is that? This compliment is for Amelia B, unless it's Amalia. I hope I'm saying that right. Currently, a graphic designer is working on billboards about people who inspire kindness and make the world better each day. And you feature on every single one of them. If you would like a compliment of your own, or if you would like to support the show, please have a look at our Patreon at patreon.com/smartbitches. Monthly pledges start at $1, and each pledge keeps me going each week and makes sure that every episode has a transcript. Hello, garlic knitter. The accessibility of the show is very important to me and to many readers and listeners as well. Plus, if you join the Patreon, you get bonus episodes, a really wonderful, fun, and welcoming Discord, and lots of other cool stuff. So have a look, patreon.com/smartbitches. And hello to Daphne, who is the newest member of our Patreon. I will have links to all of the books that we discuss in this episode and links to a lot of the things that we talk about. We talk about online courses. We talk about previous podcast episodes. We talk about a lot of things. We will have links to all of those things in the show notes at smartbitchestrashybooks.com/podcast. But without further ado, on with the conversation with me and Melonie Johnson.
Hi, my name is Melonie Johnson. I am a contemporary romance author and romcom author. I guess that we now have that distinction. I also go by the writing Lush, which is kind of become a theme or brand for me because drinking while editing seems to be my go-to. And my next romantic comedy comes out at the end of this month, end of February. And
congratulations. First of all, I thought all editing had to be done with some kind of assisted substance.
Well, this is how that whole thing came about, because there's the phrase, write drunk, edit sober. And there was some conversation on a social media site that we dare not name anymore. That, I forget how it went. And I kind of I write drunk, edit drunker.
I mean, if you get out of your own way, that's how it works, right?
So it kind of just became this thing. And then, we started the Boozy Book Broads that we did during the Panini with Angelina M. Lopez and Danielle Jackson, which was very much focused on, books and booze. So it really kind of became a brand that I leaned hard into. And about lush living isn't just about drinking. It's about indulging in things that make you happy, pleasures, without thinking that they're guilty, which romance is part of.
Absolutely. And Lush has many meanings.
Yes.
Now you mentioned the distinction between rom-com and contemporary romance, and that those are slightly different signifiers, which I agree with, but I wanted to ask you to talk more about that if you could. What do you see as the difference between those two, and why do we have the terms? Is it because contemporary romance was just too broad and we needed to be more specific? Why? What do you think is going on there, and how do you define each one?
Well, I think there are several layers to this. So I'm going to kind of go backwards. So the one thing you just mentioned was, is contemporary romance just too broad? And I would say yes.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm actually listening to, or I'm partaking in a publishing course called Publish and Thrive by Sarah Cannon, who is fantastic. And she just talked about, because she's talking about, when you pick your categories or whatnot, when you're loading your metadata, and that for a lot of genres, there's lots and lots of niche subgenres that you can kind of really kind of drill down to in what your book is. But she noted specifically contemporary romance just doesn't seem to have as many options when you're putting in your metadata. And she's like, that's so bizarre because there is so much. And so she's kind of showing the authors kind of how you can, like, you know, if you're talking about mafia romance, it's very different from, like, so all of these different subgenres within the umbrella of contemporary romance. So yes, to answer your question there, 100% there are
too many.
It is too many.
Because if I say I like contemporary romance, you say you like contemporary romance, you could be talking about a very dark, angsty, extremely sexual mafia romance. And I could be talking about Debbie Macomber and Susan Mallory. Those are two totally different.
Small town romances, beachy romances. Like there's like, I mean, we could go on and on and on. Like you said, you know, when I signed up for this course, I mean, I'm kind of segueing here for a second, but when I signed up for this course, a lot of it, I'm like, I knew there was going to be a lot of stuff that I was already aware of, tangentially, at least from my experiences. But it's only the second week, and I've definitely been learning things that I hadn't considered. And that was one of the pieces, that those light bulb moments. But for the other part of the question, what differentiates rom-com versus contemporary romance? I've had to talk about this a lot. And I think because having recently written books that are very much rom-com, the problem is we're having all contemporary, and this is a publishing problem across the board.
Yes. I'm going to just hold my lighter while you talk. I'm just going to hold the lighter and sway back and forth.
How do we market books? How do we get them in bookstores? How do we get them on shelves? And that's what happens is you get everything from Colleen Hoover to you know, to Nicholas Sparks, to like all these other authors, you know, being, one, lumped in as romance, even when they're not necessarily romance, but then two, all getting slapped with, you know, cartoon covers, illustrated covers, and that becomes an assumption of what's inside.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, again, you're going to get a Tessa Bailey, you know, super steamy versus contemporary romances that are closed door. So I think the delineation, and that's frustrating for readers when I want a rom-com, I want something that's going to make me laugh. I mean,
it's in the name, the comedy. Yes.
I want light. I want fluffy. I just want to escape into something that's honestly a bit silly. And unfortunately, you know, again, it's part of the whole, like, trying to get these books in front of as many eyeballs as possible, that they get lumped together. You know, Abby Jimenez, fantastic books, you know, but there's a lot, there's deeper themes, darker themes, you know, and we can have content warnings and that helps. But at the same time, again, if I'm picking up a romantic comedy, I just kind of want to know that's what I'm getting. And so I think the biggest part for me, and I think is the comp that we have, that there are comedic elements, and the fact that it's a romantic comedy is if you take those comedic elements out of the story,
mm-hmm.
then the story doesn't play out the way it should.
That's a very good
so that
point.
They're actually integral, just again, because like a romance can't be a romance unless the romance is integral to the story.
Right.
And I think romantic comedy can't really function as a rom-com unless there's certain things about the comedic elements that are integral to the story, from the meet cute to the conflicts to the complications that like are humorous in and of themselves.
Yeah. And the humor can come from both the situations that the characters are in and the things that characters say about those situations. Like, for example, I would look at so there are some early Kristen Higgins novels that I can reread, and I've read them 20 times and I will still crack up.
Mm-hmm,
and there are some books where the sense of humor of the characters and Jill Shalvis is the same way. There are some early Jill Shalvis books that I still laugh at. And it's the things that the characters say about the situations that they're in. And when you talked about you can't extract the comedy, well, that's extracting dialogue. That's not going to work. That's going to make your book really jumpy. You take out all the talking.
And there's plenty, and not to say that, like I mentioned, Abby Jimenez, not to say she can incredibly funny, you know, very funny things that she can do in it. And that becomes a very subjective thing. What I find funny is definitely different from what the next person may find funny.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so that's, you know, so maybe that's part of it too. But, you know, I do think we are in this weird place of everything being called a rom-com. And
well, marketing is the more something is marketed within a particular publishing trend, the more flat that term gets.
Oh, yes.
because everyone's using it, it ceases to have meaning. It's like when you write the same word 30 times, all of a sudden that word doesn't look like a real word anymore. It's like that. Now, I want to talk to you about your new book.
Which is definitely a rom-com. It is definitely very fluffy and very silly, but takes place in a funeral home.
As you do. Please tell me everything. Tell me all about this book. Just start at chapter 1. You can start reading. That's fine.
So I will tell you about the meet cute, because this is, for me, my way into a story often is the moment when the two characters meet. It's usually my way in. It's usually the spark that kind of gets the story rolling. And for me, for this story, I already knew my heroine, Kat, because she was from the last rom-com I did, Too Good to Be Real. And she was kind of the one of the trio of besties who hasn't found her one. And Kat is a bit of Taylor Swift's anti-hero song. She is a bit of the problem. She is kind of one of those people that she wants these things that she wants so much. Like she can kind of, and to see her two best friends having it, it's a very hard thing for her. And so she's very happy for them. She's excited for them. But it's this moment that all friendships face. They're out of 5-6 years out of college. Her two best friends are finding their SOs, their significant others, and possibly moving in with them. And so that this sense that they're moving on without her is kind of a central theme of this story. But she's always been attracted. She's very honest about this, that she is an asshole magnet. She's attracted to guys who are jerks.
She's an asshole magnet.
You've got to know someone like that. The story opens with her having a breakup with the latest asshole.
Yeah.
So she's kind of stuck, who ends up ditching her with his pet hedgehog. That's how the hedgehog comes into play with the story. So she ends up having to go do a last minute delivery to a funeral home. There's very explicit instructions about this boutonniere that needs to be on the body,
mm-hmm.
and she is not really fond of funeral homes to begin with for personal reasons that the book gets into a little bit. But she's just like, and no one's around. She can't find anybody, and she just wants to get in and get out. She does not want to be in this place. So she just goes into the room where the service is going to be held. And she's like, I do weddings. I don't do funerals, but I'm going to do this. And I'm going to stick this. I'm going to just pretend that he's a groom stiff with nerves and just get it done. And of course, that's when the hero walks in, wants to know, what the F are you doing?
Why are you pinning a flower on this dead guy?
And shenanigans ensue. So that's how the two meet. The hero, Mick, his family owns a funeral home in Chicago, and they're an Irish family, so they do a lot of wakes.
Yeah, many.
And he is very much my ode to Nick Miller from New Girl. Very tender-hearted person who's in his own way also a hot mess. So these two hot messes get together, and kind of he's a very kind of loving and understanding person in a way that Kat really needs.
Yeah, I'm all about mortician heroes. I wrote one too, so I'm a big fan of the
more about this a little bit.
One of the things that set up the novella that I wrote was that the hero, Jeremy, is a very goofy person. He's a big, giant, goofy, loud, silly person. But he's also part of a funeral home family. And I'm assuming that you learned this as well as I did, that in the States, a lot of funeral homes are inherited and they stay in a family. And so you have this weird ass problem of inheritance and business, but also you have to go to school to be licensed in a lot of states. The idea that you're guiding people through, as you said, the worst parts of their life was something that really attracted me. And also I was writing what I wanted to read. I was like, screw it. He's a mortician and they're Jewish and it's a camp. And I was writing all my own tropes anyway. That was, if you would like to read Sarah's self-service fanfic that was just for herself, that's what that is. It's all of my favorite things.
Well, give us the title again.
It's called Lighting the Flames, a Hanukkah romance.
Yes,
So let's talk about this. What were some of the things that you learned as you were researching this book? Because you mentioned when we were emailing about mortuary makeup and services and alternative burials. There's so many burial options now that I've never seen before.
And it's things that you don't want to think about, but maybe you should think about, like, how do you want, when it's your time, like, how do you, want to have, if you don't answer these questions, someone's going to have to take care of it for you. But the tarot, like the kinds where they have the composting bins that they basically put the body inside a composting bin, and then family members will decorate the bins often with lots of pictures and things like that, because it goes through a process of how long it takes. And then they get like these bags, if they want them, they get these bags and bags of compost material that you can then your garden or whatever. And then it's kind of like that lives on, and again, this makes me feel very morbid, but in some ways it can also be very comforting. Like,
absolutely.
I find the idea of that more comforting than embalming.
But it's really interesting to me to think about how this technology has changed substantially in the last few years, that humans are very creative. What can we do to create a place for the living, to remember a person, but also not make the negative impact of that person's burial so arduous for the environment?
Yes. And negative in general is something. So I don't know if it's because it does seem to be kind of moving faster, and how things seem to be more opportunities, more the ideas like have so long have kind of been like, this is what happens. This is what we do. This is the process. And all of these other options that are opening up, and more states that are starting to allow these things. Many states that don't allow them are starting to. The rules are changing in some regards. And I think maybe it's like once the idea is out there, it sets off, people begin to think, and, kind of it starts to grow as to what the possibilities could be, because we are seeing more of that and seeing more companies that are providing it. So, I think it just starts to take off faster and faster. And then also the idea of it being a negative experience, not just for the environment, but for the family is something that we're seeing shift as well. And that's another thing that's kind of tackled in the story is Mick, he, kind of how can I contribute to my family business? Because he originally, like you said, when it's an inherited business and you're kind of like, okay, I'm doing this, his sister, she knew she wanted to do it. She went to mortuary school. She got all that stuff, the licensing. She was 100% in. Yeah. His brother knew as the oldest, he would be taking over, kind of running the business, doing the books, all of that stuff. He was in. Mick was kind of like, he went to school to be a psychologist. He wasn't planning to, to be a part of the business. His sister and his brother had it covered. That was great. But then his parents, who are kind of, my Moira and Johnny Rose. His parents decide that they having worked in the industry and having kind of gone through so much death and everything. And what you hear often, when you work with families is regret, like what they didn't do, the things they didn't get to do. And so they're like, well, we're done. We're buying an RV and we are traveling the country. We are giving the business to you. And so they passed the business to their 3 children and split it equally among the 3 of them, and said, all right, it's yours. And so Mick is kind of like pulled into this, as a partner in the business, and being the kind of person he is, can't just walk away. It's like he will help, he will be there, he will, he wasn't expecting his parents to retire for another 20 years, and here they are, like, see ya. So he kind of, so for what he wants to do is he wants to build a bar in the funeral home, basically, have a reception space.
I mean, it is a wake.
Well, again, they already have wakes, but usually it's that's more of a separate thing. Yeah. But he's like, why not make it, like a celebration? And this is something that is happening more and more. Chicago, there was a whole story, and it's like one of those kind of kismet moments where I was already working through this, and of course you start Googling, and sure enough, there is a local Chicago funeral home who is opening a bar and getting the licensing and doing the things required. So this is happening.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
You must have been like, I am predicting the future.
Exactly. You do have that moment of, aha.
Oh.
But and also, and again, because like, I know, like for me, like I want, like, have a party, have fun, celebrate all of the good memories. And I think that we're starting to see more people that are like, yes, I want to treat this as a moment of celebration. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. And,
Yep. Exactly. And if you're reframing what the funeral is doing and you were making it a celebration for people who have the option to add the bar. I mean, I'm sure it's not like required. You can just add it or not add it to what you're doing. But like having the option to be like, it's very much part of tradition to toast to people, to raise a glass to someone. That's a very common funeral element as well. Now, you mentioned that you are writing all the things this year. What is going on with your publication schedule? What do you have in the pipeline?
So what I have in the pipeline, like as far as like what actually comes out, we'll see. So I kind of went through this weird moment of, again, and the panini definitely played into this. This kind of like frustration of there's all this like exhaustion and mental exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, not just for myself, but, for my children who, it was a really tough time if you had kids and getting them through this. You have kids, and I think your children are not too off the ages of mine.
Yeah, they're 15 and 17, and they're still feeling the effects of having gone through the pandemic. Oh, yeah.
I have 14 and 19. And so really in this kind of time of where the social connections and that social interaction is so integral to everything for them, and had missing out on so much of that. And, so just a lot of working through stuff with them. And I just like, at the end of the day, I just couldn't sit down and write, especially write funny. It was really hard. And so you had talked about how, your novella was kind of like your id book, or your like the things that you wanted to just having fun.
Fan service party of one.
Exactly. So I just, stepped away from the book that I had a deadline kind of like hovering over my head that I wasn't going anywhere with, and just started just kind of drafting stuff for fun, things that made me happy, that I enjoyed. And it helped me kind of get back into the groove and get back to writing again. And so I it's paranormal. It's like modern day Celtic Fae, completely different from anything that I write, but stuff that I loved reading. I loved reading the Karen Marie Moning Highland books. Like those were such an escape for me. And so kind of like letting myself just play in this completely separate world. And so I just kind of like, I'm going to invest in myself. I commissioned covers, and I'm, they'll be under a pen name, so that I feel like it's a safe place to play when it's not my own name.
Oh, I completely understand.
And so hopefully if everything goes the way I'm hoping it will, and again, that's part of why I took that class I mentioned, the Sarah Cannon class, that the first one should be out in August around the time of Lugnasad. I believe it's one of they're all on like these Celtic, pagan celebrations. So cool. We will see. And then I also, I am someone who needs external motivation.
Yes.
To do things.
Yes, I understand.
So I signed up for some anthologies that helped me kind of, again, have deadlines, lots of people counting on you. So I wrote my very first seasoned romance, which is characters in their 40s and up. Yes, we are seasoned. Or
what is the seasoning? What is the is it old? Is it Old Bay?
I do not know, but Karen Booth, who writes some great. She calls it later in life, which I'm still like, 40s. Okay, fine. Yes. Later in life, whatever.
Poultry seasoning. That's no.
I don't know. I think it's salt from all the margaritas. That's the seasoning.
Or maybe some herbs de Provence. What seasoning is it? Now I'm just going to be in maybe it is Old Bay. I mean, I live in Maryland, and there's Old Bay you can get literally any solid piece of matter with a Maryland flag or the Old Bay logo on it. It's kind of incredible, but I think I'm going to say all seasoned romance is Old Bay, as you were anyway.
Yeah, so later in life, what have you, but with characters in their 40s and even early 50s, and I called the series the MILFs Just Want to Have Fun series, and it was a group of teachers who met kind of they all were stuck doing cafeteria duty, observation duty. I was a teacher, so I was really pulling on a lot of my experiences as a teacher, and just again, like to just write someone my own age was I could make references to certain songs and bands and whatever and not worry like, oh my God, how will this 30-year-old or 20-something-year-old have any clue? I mean, my 14-year-old is listening to everything she listens to is stuff that was popular when we were teenagers. So, I mean, but so that part I think doesn't matter anymore.
I don't get that either. My 17-year-old has an entire playlist. He's like, Mom, do you know this song? I'm like, that's En Vogue. Of course I know that song. I know all of their songs. He's listening to En Vogue. He has like a 90s R&B playlist. And he's like, have you heard this before? I'm like literally once a day when I was 17. Like, what is happening right now?
It is fascinating to me because my 14-year-old, she went through I kept everything. I'm such a pack rat. She went through all my old CDs and she likes to listen to them like like you have everything you need at like we have a Spotify account, whatever you want, just click. And but she knows she wants to put the CD in the CD player and
no, moms, this is a no skips album. We're not skipping around. This is a no skip. We're going front to back.
And so, writing these characters who were, women in their 40s and 50s, and obviously the heroes as well, that was just fun for me. And so I've written three of them so far, and I plan to do 2 more. And, one of them's divorced, one of them has never been married, one of them wants to get married, but the guy is dragging his feet. So kind of all in different kind of situations.
And, the ominous, ever-present, looming eventuality of menopause. And all the little ways it starts to trickle into your life because you're not there yet, but somehow you're feeling some of it. It grows forward into your timeline and you don't know what it is, but maybe it's something about menopause. I don't know. Yeah. The looming tentacles of menopause.
Yes. And talking about those experiences and just having heroines who are like, my period might show up this month. It might not. I don't know.
I'm having all the normal symptoms, but maybe it'll visit. Maybe it won't. I don't know. It's up in the air. Makes life fun and exciting and annoying.
And I know there is like an entire genre or subgenre that has popped up, the midlife magical kind of series. Like there's a lot of
women coming into menopause and then magical powers. I am all about that metaphor. Because if you think about it, in the portrayal of media, women who are in that age room, we're expected to just disappear. Our kids are graduating. They're now the main characters of their lives. The portrayal in media, we just disappear and recede into the background in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I mean, I think maybe having very kind of like in the spotlight women who are now in their 50s.
Yeah.
We can't all be Jennifer Lopez, but, but we're redefining that, like 50, 60, whatever, doesn't mean like a specific thing anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't. When we were emailing, you mentioned that your muse flew away and that you reconnected. And I know you said part of that was, I'm just going to write something under a completely different name in a completely different world and do whatever I want. But also, mad props for recognizing that you need an external motivator. That's a really important thing to know about yourself. What was the experience like of reconnecting with your desire to write and the sense of fun of writing?
I think that's exactly it, the sense of fun. And it can be, and I mean, I don't want to be like, oh, woe is me, like being traditionally published, it's a dream. It was a dream that I had, and to have that dream come true, everything has, its pros and cons, and certain elements of traditional publishing can, like, I'll just be very blunt, can be like soul crushing.
Oh,
in terms of a lot of things, of, because you give up so much control. over certain elements. And in some ways it, they know what they're doing and they're making good calls. In other ways, it's just incredibly frustrating to feel like you have to let go pieces of things that were important to you. So I felt like for me moving forward, looking at, and Becca Syme, who's another kind of like author coach, she talks a lot about, you just kind of figuring out what you want. What do you want your career to look like? What do you want your writing life to look like? And so kind of taking that really hard look at what I wanted. And, I do enjoy certain aspects of traditional publishing. I do really enjoy, the connections I've made with readers through it. And I've been very blessed with some great editors.
Yeah.
And that's part of the frustrating process as well. And everyone in publishing is going through this. Losing people that I worked with, who just leave the industry. And then it's just heartbreaking over and over again to lose, my first copy editor, who she was fantastic. She left. My first publicist, she left.
It's so disheartening, right?
Yeah. And then my developmental editor who acquired me, I was one of her first acquisitions. It was very exciting. We really worked well together. And then in January of last year, she announced that she was leaving publishing. And this was like right after one of my close friends who also is at a big house had announced that her editor was leaving. And I was like, oh my God, that's terrible. And I was like, thank God it's not me. And then like 2 weeks later.
And you have to look at an industry that is bleeding talent and go, what the hell? Why are you not? What is happening? And how do you make it stop? Because the people that I have worked with being edited by someone who can sort of see the big picture and that's a real skill. And to watch talent like that leave is just so awful.
Yeah. And I know the union, the HarperCollins union, I think they just ratified the contract. But the fact that they had to go through that in the first place, and the fact that it took so freaking long.
2 months.
It is an industry that I think expects a lot out of those who work in it, because they're kind of playing off this fact that it's an art and that you love what you do. And so that should somehow excuse all of the extra time and effort and whatnot that you put into it. And so I think burnout is incredibly high, and it's, it definitely, and it is a business, but I know for me, those relationships I form with the people within the business feel very personal. It can become it just can kind of like, you kind of go through a mourning process. I felt like I went through a mourning process when my editor left. And my new one, who was assigned to the book that I was currently working on. And part of it too, there's an incredible amount of guilt for me, because my book should have been done by the time that she left. If I had been on schedule, it would have been done. It would have been in post-production, and I just couldn't get that book done. I couldn't do it. And so when she's, and I wasn't the reason, but when she announced she was leaving, there was this incredible sense of guilt that we couldn't get this across the finish line together.
Yeah.
And I think, but there was so much guilt in not meeting my deadline, but the more authors I talk to, the more authors who I respect incredibly, I talk to that have also been missing deadlines right and left. I think we're all tapped out and figuring out how to move forward and still produce quality work. It's right. So how you get back to that place of joy, how you get back to that place of feeling like you can be productive. One, I was very lucky with the new editor that came on. She's been fantastic. She kind of, in a sense, breathed new life into the story. So I was able, getting back to it that way helped me a lot. But then also it was this having to step away and work on something else. And I know for some people, it is refilling the well, and I'm trying to think of the book. There's something about like laziness or anti-lazy or something about it's not about being lazy.
Laziness does not exist.
Thank you.
Laziness does not exist by Dr. Devin Price.
Thank you.
Love that book. I did an interview with Dr. Price because I love that book so much. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, that you need to step away. Is
that anywhere that I can hear that?
Of course, I'll send you a link.
Part of it is probably this American productivity, I don't know.
The productivity narrative. The productivity gospel, which is such terrible.
But the sense that, to take a step back and to read for pleasure, to watch something for pleasure, to let, that's refill your well. And, And I think when you're on that kind of like, and it could be traditional or indie publishing that you feel like you're on that treadmill. I think especially when you're own boss and all that, it can be sometimes even more difficult, but at least the person you have to answer to is yourself.
When you make your job out of something that you love doing, that wasn't paying you, that now is paying you, that has a financial compensation to attached, it becomes a different thing. It feels different.
It does feel different. And also like your sense of worth, like it can all mess with your head, like how much your book sells or how much your next, advance it. Like all of those different pieces really start to mess with your sense of worth. Mm-hmm. And again, Becca Syme has some great YouTube videos about like that, your productivity is not your worth. So just kind of refiguring all that stuff out too. Yeah. Allowing myself to write for fun. It's like giving myself permission.
Yeah. Write whatever you want. It doesn't matter. You don't have to listen. And I think that's true for a lot of writers, that the first book is a lot easier than the second one, because the second one, who's reading, there are people who've looked at it and responded to it. It wasn't just in your head.
So I got to, you were wonderful in inviting me onto the podcast back when I first debuted in 2019.
Yeah.
And I had that really weird experience of being a triple release. So they put 3 books out in the space of 3 months. Mm-hmm. So I went from a debut author with nothing out there to an author with 3 books out. So all 3 of those books were done, finished before they hit the market. So and I didn't know it was a luxury at the time because I felt like I was just spinning plates and going bananas, but having written all those in the safe bubble of my own world without like anything outside coming into it, that you never get that back again. Because yes, even when you don't want it, every voice outside of can be in your head, and
absolutely
locking that stuff out is a skill.
So I always ask this question: what books are you reading right now that you might want to tell people about?
Oh, goodness. Okay. So let's see here. So I just got Take the Lead by Alexis Daria, which is a re-release.
Yes. I remember the original cover, and I like this one very much.
This is gorgeous. Well, I still have the original cover, and when that came out, my youngest, I think, was maybe 8 at the time. And she like drew a shirt on him because he didn't have a shirt. She gave him a shirt. But Alexis and I were back when Golden Heart existed. We were Golden Heart sisters together. Her would take the lead and me with Getting Hot with the Scott. And so it was so, because I saw it was kind of part of her journey when it was first published as digital first, back when that was traditional publishing was pushing that as a thing. And to see this get a second chance, to see it come back and get kind of like the spotlight it deserves, it's been so thrilling and exciting. So I'm having fun with that, having fun with kind of like seeing the little changes and the things she added. That's really fun. And then I'm also reading The Vibrant Years by Sonali Dev.
Yep.
And that one, again, because I'm having fun with how she's playing with the 3-person narrative and having it kind of be this, because I love stories of sisterhood and friendship, like strong ties like that.
Yeah.
And which she does very well. And that book is a lot of fun. And then as far as serious stuff, I've been reading All the Living and the Dead, which I think you've been reading too. And
yes.
More later. I've been reading that at night, and I know I feel like Wednesday Addams, like this is my nighttime reading.
Yeah, and we are going to record an episode just about that book because it was completely serendipitous that we were both reading it at the same time. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I ask her about it, this episode's going to be like 2 hours long because we're going to spend so much time on this book. So we're going to do another episode about All the Living and the Dead as a nonfiction book. It is so good. It is, I have to like warn people about some of the things that are in the book, but it is so good. So good. And it is very Wednesday Adam bedtime reading.
It is. But I think part of it too, like nonfiction, sometimes you don't think narrative voice in nonfiction, but there is. And she, I don't remember her name right off the top of my head, but because we'll get into this when we talk about the book later.
Yeah.
But I think that definitely plays into how you can go about enjoying this book that touches on some very dark topics.
Yeah. Yeah. Very dark. Where can people find you on the internet if you wish to be found?
I'm pretty easy to find because my mom spelled my name the way she did. So Melonie, Melo with an O, N-I-E Johnson. You're either going to come across me or a woman who runs casinos. I am not the casino person. She is lovely, but that's not me. That seems to be like the top two Google searches are me or Melonie Johnson that runs casinos. So Melonie Johnson, the redhead, that's me. You'll find me on Instagram. You'll find me on TikTok. I have moved over there, very like tiptoed over there, I should say. And the Writing Lush, hashtag the Writing Lush, that will be me pretty much on all the socials as well.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for doing this interview.
Thank you. It's always fun to talk to you.
All right. We will connect again in a couple of weeks and talk about that book. But until then, thank you. And that brings us to the end of this week's episode. Thank you to Melonie for hanging out with me to talk about all of the things. And thank you to Melonie for scheduling another interview so we can take a deep dive into a book that we happen to both be reading. This book is so cool. And I want to recommend it, but I also want to be very clear that it is about death and grieving and dying. And there are a lot of really painful things inside the book. So if that's not something that you want to put into your brain, I completely understand. But if you would like to read the book in anticipation of our discussion of it, it is called All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell. I end each episode with a bad joke, and this week is no exception. This joke comes from Clay, who is a member of the podcast Patreon, and Clay's 9-year-old. Hello, Clay, and hello to the 9-year-old. Are you ready for this wonderful joke? Okay. Why do bees have such sticky hair? Give up? Why do bees have such sticky hair? They use honeycombs. Given that spring is showing up way, way early, like it's the end of February and my neighbor's daffodils are blooming, which is very weird for this time of year, I was very excited to have a bee joke. Bee jokes! On behalf of everyone here, we wish you the very best of reading. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you back here next week. Smart Podcast Trashy Books is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find outstanding shows to subscribe to at frolic.media/podcast. Honeycombs. That's a really good cereal. Now I want a bowl of honeycombs.